It's Wednesday, the 21st of August, 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 big stories to get through in 5 minutes. Story number 1, a forecast pickup in economic growth has increased the risk that inflation could become entrenched, meaning that interest rates will need to stay higher for longer. These are all some of the insights that came out of the minutes of the Reserve Bank's latest board meeting.
Yes, the minutes were released yesterday. They say the central bank board considered lifting the cash rate to 4.6% from 4.35% at its August 5-6 meeting, fearing the economy was still too hot and inflation is no longer falling as rapidly as before. Analysts said the minutes show that the Reserve Bank is even more concerned about higher inflation than previously thought. While the Reserve Bank board ultimately kept the cash rate on hold, the minutes show the board judged this would only be possible if the central bank committed to keeping higher interest rates in place until next year. Now, after that decision in a press conference, Governor Michelle Bullock made it very clear that rates weren't going to change anytime soon, and not this year at all. That was in contrast to what most bond investors had thought. The Reserve Bank said it was concerned about the enduring strength of the economy and a looming increase in economic growth, which is expected to hit an annual rate of 2.6% by the middle of next year, up from just 1.1% right now, Michael.
Sean, so just explain this to me. We knew the Reserve Bank was serious about inflation. They've talked about it a lot, but the minutes suggest that they are really serious, or even perhaps worried that not enough has been done to push the pace of price rises lower.
Yeah, a few things came out of yesterday in the past few days. While household spending has eased sharply since the Reserve Bank started raising rates, the bank is a little bit worried about what the stage 3 tax cuts will do to spending, i.e. might push it too fast. Also, the Reserve Bank isn't sure what's going on. The minutes yesterday used the word uncertain 13 times, and the board stressed that decisions will evolve in line with data. Also, the post-board meeting announcement 2 weeks ago triggered a bit of a furore between the central bank and the government about too much government spending. Michelle Bullock, the governor, has pulled back from that somewhat. Just one sign that people are a bit worried, the Aussie dollar is trading back above 67 US cents. Apart from beef periods in July and around Christmas, the currency hasn't been at that level in a couple of years. That suggests that rates in Australia are going to be relatively high compared to other economies.
Okay, moving on to story number 2 now. Australian and Indonesian troops will be able to operate from each other's countries under a new defence cooperation pact that's been billed as the most significant agreement ever to be reached between the two neighbours.
The treaty-level agreement finalised between Indonesia's President-elect Prabowo Subianto and Defence Minister Richard Marles will allow reciprocal access by each country to the other's military facilities, delivering unprecedented joint training opportunities. Prabowo hailed the very good agreement as he urged Australia to further bolster support for his nation's economic security, help it develop its agricultural sector and fight Indonesia's serious problem with drugs and narcotics. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who hosted the soon-to-be counterpart at a meeting with senior Australian ministers, said the agreement was a breakthrough in the nation's bilateral relationship.
Story number 3, Sean. Vicinity, which owns shopping centres including Chadstone in Melbourne, QVB in Sydney, said occupancy rates are back to their highest level since before the pandemic.
It is good news and comes despite slowing sales amid the cost of living crisis. The group's statutory profit more than doubled. Its share price ended up 1%. Chief Executive Peter Huddle said Vicinity was writing longer leasing deals, averaging 3.6 years now, up from 3.3 years. Capitalisation rates, like investment yields, they're showing signs of stabilising. Leasing activity has lifted occupancy across Vicinity's 57 assets to 99.3%. That's the highest level before the pandemic. In some of the big CBD malls, Emporium, Melbourne, Sydney's Queen Victoria building, it's 99.6%, which is actually higher than pre-pandemic.
Story number 4, Sean, the big news internationally. US President Joe Biden defended his legacy yesterday in a lengthy valedictory speech to the Democratic Convention, saying that his presidency reunited the country after the divisiveness of the Trump years.
Biden called on the convention to support Kamala Harris as his successor, saying choosing her as his vice president was the best decision I made in my whole career. Mr. Biden argued he had set the country on a solid economic course and touted foreign policy successes, especially the expansion of NATO and help for Ukraine against Russia's invasions. His remarks came shortly after Ms. Harris made a surprise appearance at the convention, hailing Biden's lifetime of service. Now, Mr. Biden was due to fly out of Chicago after his speech skipped the rest of the convention. It will culminate on Thursday with Ms. Harris's formal nomination. Other big-name speakers in the next few days include Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Harris's running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Last one, story number 5, higher interest rates and the cost of living crisis is hitting one attractive but perhaps a tad expensive hobby, vintage car collection, Sean.
Well, unbeknownst to me, we're in the middle of vintage auction season in the US, and for the weekend at Saturday, auction sales were down 8% from last year, but way below the bumper 2022 year, according to Haggerty Inc. Half of the vehicles failed to realise their low price estimate, not helping as a large number of vintage cars on the market at the moment. The good news is that after auction deals are pushing final sales higher, according to a report on Bloomberg. Of the top 10 sales last week, 6 were Ferraris. The top seller among 5 auction houses was a 1960 Ferrari 250 Spider, went for $17 million. Next best was a 1938 Alfa Romeo. It had been stolen and recovered. It went for $14 million.
Yeah, great story. There we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 21st of August, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. If 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to check out as well the new episode of How Do They Afford That, our sister podcast, out every Wednesday. Today's episode is 6 side hustles you may not have considered. I'll put a link in today's show notes. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.